And welcome back, everyone, yet to another episode. It is the $80 million episode. This one, it's worth $80 million. Supposedly, allegedly. Why is it worth $80 million, Ray?
Because it's lessons from an $80 million brand that if they wouldn't have done what they did, they'd probably be doubled it where they are now. So we'll call it an $80 million lesson.
Right. Yes. So it'd be a $160 million lesson because we get to learn. Nice. My favorite learnings are the ones that other people commit, like mistakes that other people commit, because then it's like, ooh, no tax for me. I learn from other people's dummy tax.
Isn't that funny? Like, there's so much advice in the world that a lot of us repeat the same mistakes as everybody else because we probably just didn't listen to someone who was probably further along than we were.
There's also the other thing too, that voice in the head that goes, "Oh, that doesn't apply to me."
Yeah, exactly. It's like, "Oh, that won't happen to me."
Yeah, I'm special. No, it's unique for me. I like that advice. I mean, remember Lean and how when we first started introducing it, everyone had so much trouble translating it from manufacturing to what we do. Like, oh, but how does this work for, like, this works for manufacturing, but how does it work for, like, service business? It's like, well, if you maybe paused for a second and, like, thought about how it could, that might be helpful. But yeah, I'm totally with you. It's like the advice is all out there. I think it's filtering through it and then translating it. I think the translating part is difficult, which is why we're doing this episode right now, everyone, so that we can hopefully translate it for a brand that's doing 8 million or a brand that's on its way to doing its first million in that year. Because I'm sure even by hearing, oh, these are the headaches of an $80 million brand, it's so unrelatable to me. I'm just starting out. But there are definitely going to be things in there.
I would say, I honestly think most problems they experience from 0 to 1 million, and then from 1 million to 10, and then 10 to even 100, which is also a massive gap. A lot of times I find it is the same problem, but just different magnitudes.
Right. And also, I guess the complexity, it starts to become a little bit more abstracted, right? Like that whole typical E-myth thing, which is if you are starting up a small little pie shop or food truck and it's just you, your hands at the pie, and then the customer. And then when you start hiring people, now it's you, your employees, their hands, the pie, the customer. And then if you move up even more and have like different food trucks, now you got a food truck manager, their employees, the pie, their hands, the customer. And so now it takes on a different nature. And I think sometimes what a lot of business leaders I talk to, what they sometimes reminisce about is, man, I wish my hands were just back on the pie. Yeah. But what they dreamt about when their hands were on the pie was, I wish I could sell more pies to more people because people love my pie. So it's like,
I can't wait till one day my hand isn't on the pie anymore.
Right. Exactly. So it's this circular thing for sure. So how did it come about even that you spent time with the $80 million brand? They were picking your brain. They needed to like level up. Maybe take us through that.
Yeah. So the background is I have a friend who they recently hired a business he had, and they took that business in because he was really good at a specific skill set, and he became a director level role inside that company. So the $80 million company, they have several businesses inside of it, and this friend of mine, he knows what we do, and we often go out to breakfast quite often because he lives like 30 minutes away from me. And just through conversation on breakfast, he said, "Hey man, we're really struggling on the acquisition side. Would you ever be open to doing a call with us? Because we're struggling, and the last few years we got where we are because we're really good at organic. But now we're struggling on the ad side and acquisition." So that's how it came about. And really what brought out this conversation, which is kind of the theme we're going to talk about, is this brand, they had a competitor who in the last year has been growing like crazy. So now these people no longer have what they thought was like a monopoly. They no longer have what they thought was a big moat, because frankly, someone is just outspending that moat, building bridges over their moat and just running over them.
Got you. So take us through it. Like what were the main talking points, frustrations?
So you haven't watched the call recording yet, but I'll probably explain to you. So what happened is the context is they've grown very quickly through organic and through many different channels. They're very good at distribution organically. And they acquire some companies, which also help them get to that revenue amount, acquire companies that are already doing significant revenue. And so the talking points originally what came about was, how many creatives should I be making? Like, what's the cadence I should be doing for my brand? So they're spending like not a lot of money. I think they spent $300,000 last month in marketing, which is for that big of a brand. I would say it's quite small.
Yeah,
and they would also agree to that now. And so that's where the conversation started, was number of creatives I need. Then before that call, when I was looking at their creative, their competitors' creatives, where they're at in the marketplace, the conversation weaved into, well, why aren't you spending more in marketing? And that's what I came to that call with them, is like, why aren't you spending more in marketing? And they didn't have a great answer. That's where they said, well, how much should I be spending? And I was like, well, your competitor has 1,000 live ads at the moment, 1,000 ads in their Meta ad library only, plus on Google, they're out bidding, spending you guys on Google as well. Anytime I've ever seen that, D, if a brand has 1,000 ads on Meta library and what they're doing on Google, they're typically spending $1 million a month minimum. So just to kind of compare that, that's where I asked, like, why aren't you spending more? Because you are the top dog in the space. And the conversation weaved into, well, how clear is your marketing tied to your finance and finance objectives? Because the point that I got across to them is there's different ways to play the game. You can play the e-commerce game, which is I just want to maximize profitability, which is the true thing. You should do that. But also you have to keep in mind is the other part of how you play the game is whoever is willing to acquire the most customers wins. And so I asked them, I said, your targets.
Yeah, and pay for them. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, your targets, what are they based off of? Your profit targets. Like, well, just net profit. Okay, cool. Well, but would you be okay to spend more and make more net profit at a lower profit margin? And that's where they never.
And do you mean like first time customer profit?
So what I meant just bottom line net profit, just
right.
New and returning, which is we're going to get into that. Is they didn't have a good answer because they were just thinking of net profit and the profit margin, which is good. However, the problem with that is, as we all know, you can through volume make more net profit overall and acquire more new customers, and obviously that gives you a better foothold in the future because that snowballs. And that's what they hadn't thought about. They were just trying to maintain a profit margin no matter what versus a net profit number no matter what, or a contribution profit number no matter what. And that's why they were capping themselves on spend. So the conversation evolved into, and this is a philosophy I actually took from someone else on X, Sean from Ridge, is how close am I willing to fly to the sun without getting burned? The thinking behind that is, at the end of the day, if the game is whoever acquires the most customers wins, what is the lowest amount of MER or the lowest amount of money I'm willing to take and to acquire as many customers as possible so that I can win that net game of more customers, more moat, more market share, and then more people that are going to buy from me in the future. So that's kind of the summary of the conversation. So in that conversation, I showed them how you should be tying marketing down to what is the actual contribution profit or net profit. And also you could 3x your spend, make more net profit overall, but now you just acquired 2 times more new customers than your competition, which means now you can spend more money to acquire more new customers, take more market share. And then the other thing I show them too is show them that with the amount of spend you're doing, here's how many ads you should be making. So this is crazy. So they spent $300,000 last month on marketing. They probably made 6 new ads in the last 30 days, which is kind of blows my mind a little bit. Now, I don't know what the performance is like. They didn't share their ad account, but I know the person I was running the ads told me that they're just focusing on ROAS, which is automatic warning bell to me because it means you're focusing too much on first order profitability, not on growth. Because the big pain they're having right now is they're actually down. I think they said from where they were last year, they're actually down 35-40% year over year. And they believe a lot of that's contributed to their competition because their competition is taking the exact same products that they sell, exact same products, and outspending them. So the cautionary tale I think we should all have a conversation around is, if you are not willing to be more aggressive, someone else will, and they will pass you by like you're sitting on blocks.
Man, there's so much to unpack there. And we talked about comfort levels and risk aversion levels in a previous podcast episode, but I think it's worthwhile bringing back up here again. You spoke about actually being able to tie your CAC threshold, CPA, whatever you want to call it. And they're not necessarily exactly the same thing, guys, by the way, but CAC threshold or CPA, and overlay that on your business objectives and your actual company financial statements and numbers to be able to think through what that looks like. There's that. And then there's, of course, the spend piece and the creative piece. So there's a lot there. Maybe let's start at where you kicked off, which is, how does one, so that we can translate this for brands that might be early or long, do you believe that there are like life cycles or phases in a business where there is a right time, it's just in time to be more conservative with your aggression levels, and there are times, life cycle phases where now it's time to really start to open up, like, put foot on the gas a little bit more?
Yes.
And how can a brand discern through that?
I think we've seen it too, because we've been with brands who were funded but had zero sales, brands that came to us and they had 50,000 a month and grew them to 7 figures a month. And the typical phase that we always see is in the very beginning, they're very cautious about first order profitability, or ROAS. And every single time, so this is probably people that are sub 1 million, or some people sub 2 million, but we'll call it 1 to 2 million, okay? Where every dollar is so precious to them because they are bootstrapped that they want it to make sense. However, typically when we see that, anytime someone says, I need this ROAS, or return on ad spend target, typically what that means is they need it to cover a certain profit for it to make sense for the business. However, on the contrary, what that means is, when we see someone say, I just need a certain ROAS, what it automatically tells us is they don't have a firm enough grasp on their business numbers. So I'm going to get more specific here on their fixed costs, on their variable costs, on their marketing spend. A conversation we often have is, how much revenue do you need at a minimum each day to keep the lights on? They typically don't know their numbers well enough, because ROAS should never be fixed as a target. What it should be flexible based off of volume. Because at a 4x ROAS, we can make a certain amount of profit, but if we can scale at a 2x but make you more profit overall, isn't that better for your business? So typically most brands, like I said, they're sub 1 to 2 million, and those are typically people that it's their first brand, typically. Because the more seasoned brand owners, they understand that complexity. Because typically when we work with brands who have either a CFO or they have a board that has done this before, or they've done it before, they say, here is the minimum revenue I need a day, and here is the contribution profit target I need. Spend as much money as long as I'm making this much contribution profit a day. Because they understand the relationship between acquiring more customers and volume as well. And
it's not and baked into those targets. Baked into those targets are also is the reality check too, of those are numbers based off of the business objective of, say, grabbing market share. Those are the numbers, like those are the targets based off of the business objective of right now survivability until we get product market fit. These are the numbers, right? Like the business objective kicks in as the anchor, and then everything else goes on top of that. Would you say that that's how they even come up with that number, rather than, I would imagine,
Yeah,
it would not be something like, I saw that this one brand or this one guru said that 8x is where you need to be at, so we just picked 8.
I think there's some of that. I think also really a lot of that could be solved is if people just got into a spreadsheet, got their business numbers, if I get this many sales at this target, what would my profit be? And then playing with at 4x, but at more volume at 2x, what would it be? I think that typically shows that. No one's ever done that. That comes at that stage. So typically where a lot of decisions are happening at is they just look at their product cost and some fixed revenue estimate of 30K. So that means I just need
the stuff that they tell you to do on YouTube.
Yeah. So I just need a 4x. And that often means that no one's actually done the math with them and done the model. And so, for example, I think I've shown the cohort report on the pod before. Have I?
Oh, how often? When have we not shown the cohort analysis?
But I like to bring this up because it's such a reality check when you think about it like this. Is the reason why new customers is so critical is because of the snowball effect of them buying from you again and again and again. Because the bigger we can get that piece of the pie that where returning customers are buying from us, it's more profit, less marketing spend you have to spend. And that's why it's so important that the more you literally get new customers, the fatter and the numbers and the profit you get from them buying again over these months snowballs. And I think that's where sometimes people who haven't done this before, they get kind of mentally stuck because they think about, I need 20K in profit this month by all costs. Or would you rather have 60K in profit in 8 months because you acquired that many new customers? And so that's where you need the ability or someone to help sense check with you. Where do you want to be? And then that's why the conversation I have with the brand is, okay, what's your target? What do you want to be? And they're like, I forget what the number is, like 90 million, 100 million, I don't know. And I said, okay, well, how many returning customers do you need? How many new? Like they didn't know that. Which means if you charted that out and you exported your numbers, I have this many returning customers. This is what I can expect in the future. Well, then that difference or that gap is what I have to acquire to hit that number.
Yes. Yeah. And what's really hitting me now as you're talking through this is proof in the pudding. I think that staying in one mode and doing it well can actually get you pretty darn far, like 80 million a year far, right? And focusing on or allocating resources to non-paid areas, as in non-paid acquisition areas, right? And doubling down on that can go quite far. But every method has a ceiling, and then you kind of have to graduate to that next one. I think I understand the survivability portion, right? Like there are some D2C growth or D2C media buying philosophies out there, which is all you have to look at is just your daily in-platform ROAS, your daily profit and loss, and just go daily, which is helpful for a first timer or a newer person because it's so much more. I can manage day, right? A day is not man-made. The sun goes up, the sun goes down. A week is man-made, 7 days, like nothing changes. No mega sun shows up at 7 days and goes down. So now my brain has an additional thing. So I get that. The difficulty is, and I learned this lesson, one of my mentors kind of asked me this when I was younger. He goes, he pretty much gave me some advice and says, hey, listen, if you go to a shoe store and you ask the shop assistant, how's business? They'll say, oh yeah, sold 2 pairs of shoes this afternoon. If you go ask the manager how's business, they'll say, oh, this month's revenue was better than last month. Right? If you go to the regional managers of that shoe store, they'll say, well, this quarter we are behind on target, but next quarter we're looking to go up. And then if you go to the owner of the shoe store, they'll go, in 5 years' time, this is going to be shoes that you can order and buy from one click, and it'll go to your home. And I envision like drones going, right? So the bigger aspirations you have that need to be able to buy some binoculars and maybe let go of the microscope starts to kick in. So that was always a profound lesson for me, to be like, well, I can look at it daily, or I can look at it daily in the context of the week, in the context of the month, in the context of the time ahead.
I think that's why it's so hard too, right? Because you have to do that so that you have the right context to make the right decision for today, and also probably have enough risk tolerance that I'm taking on more risk for tomorrow, for next month, and for next year.
Which requires, I think, and I understand, I empathize how difficult it can be for the newer ones that are breaking into the scene, or even for the ones that are their first time, which is that requires a certain amount of like confidence and ballsiness.
Yeah.
And I think someone holding your hand, or at least guiding you along the way to go, this is normal. This is supposed to happen, as opposed to, just take all of your ads, put into one campaign. Like that doesn't help anyone any. Like tactically, it's great, but then how do you calm those nerves and see it through? So how can someone tell when it's time to shift gears? Do you have a sense of, like, if you had to give advice to someone and go like, hey, Ray, how do I tell? Like it's worked so far, but when can I tell if I wanted to save myself the headache and tell ahead of time? Mm-hmm. How can I do that?
So typically when a brand plateaus, that's an automatic indication you need some kind of breakthrough. So one breakthrough is to lower your threshold that you're willing to acquire a customer. If you understand the kind of how close you can fly to the sun to acquire more net new customers.
Or lower the in-platform ROAS threshold.
Correct,
Right.
Yeah. So we see that all the time. A brand's plateaued. There's many reasons why that's happening, but a lot of times, especially brands that are like the sub 2 million, it's because they're still stuck. I have to maintain this ROAS, but there's other ways that you can still make that net profit more volume. Okay.
Yes.
So that's one. I think another one where it's an automatic indication that they may have to change and pivot is, in this case, like this 80 million brand, is there's so many people coming into the space that if you are not willing to be more aggressive, they will pass you by. So for example, the cautionary tale from this meeting was the founder said, you know what, 2 years ago, I had a conversation with my team and we actually thought, you know what, why don't we be more aggressive? Because we have such a good advantage. We could own everybody if we just be more aggressive and acquire more new customers to spend more in marketing. And they didn't. They went more the conservative route to focus on profit, which is fine. But now guess what caught up? Success breeds your next competition. Someone come in who is willing to be that aggressive and is just like blowing past them. So that's another reason typically where, like, if you are not willing to be aggressive, someone else will. So I think those are two. And then the third one is going to be where if they're kind of going through the same paces and they know that their brand has seasonality. I'll never forget, there was a brand we used to work with. They sold wedding bands. And for a couple of years, they're kind of stuck at the same revenue because they were focusing on in-platform ROAS to then focus on net profit. And because of that decision, they were stuck because they're highly seasonal. Rather, instead, why don't we be conservative when we have to, but then make as much hay while the sun is shining when it's our end season to capitalize on the growth of that market share. And it's funny because that same brand we work with, I had the ability to speak to the number one competitor in that space, their CMO, and that's what they did. And they were 20 million a year, right? So it's a really great compare and contrast that luckily with our experience, we were able to see these patterns and us working with brands. But yeah, it's typically those three areas that I would say.
Yeah. And how do you not, for want of a better way to put it, you've optimized your thinking and gotten very used to operating in a certain way, right? This feels safe. This feels predictable.
That's it. It's safe because it's hard to change and it feels uncomfortable to change and risky and scary. And
Yeah, totally. So, and I think that there's a troublesome thing here, which is watching a real number in real time on a high frequency, like a daily basis, for example, like in platform or through some type of measurement tool or attribution tool, watching that number dip and go like down. So I've set it to be 4, 2.7, 3.4, 1.6, all that. It's very observable. Meanwhile, watching my business plateau, a business doesn't plateau overnight. It doesn't just go like that because you don't have enough time to watch it plateau. So then you have to endure that to go like, are we plateauing? Are we plateauing to week 2, week 3? Are we plateauing? Oh, this month's financial report is in and our P&L is in now. Are we really plateauing? Could be a season. And then let's wait out for next month. So you've got that going on. And that's almost the last thing you want to hear. Excuse me. That's almost the last thing you want to hear from your marketing manager. Be like, maybe we're plateauing. It's not my fault. It's because we're plateauing in other areas. So in that very real situation, I almost wonder, I don't know if you have a take on it, but how do you even handle that conversation? Is it like an all hands, just go, guys, we need to think through this quite clearly?
I mean, I think everyone should start talking to other people, other experts, just pay for an hour of their time because you need perspective. That's the important thing. Like perspective is important.
Or even other operators in similar,
Or literally reach out to your competitors. Like, what are you seeing right now? Because at the end of the day,
we do that with other agency owners.
Unless you're a 9-figure brand, your competition is really not your competition because there's billions of people in the world or 300 million in the US. Like, there's enough to go around. So it's not going to hurt you to reach out to a few competitors. Number one. Number two is like, man, I think in the last 2, it's funny, like when I was in the 20s, people always say like, the world is ruthless out there. I never really thought it or saw it. But I think in the last 2 years, it's really struck me, the world is ruthless out there. And it doesn't care about our babies, how much we invested in a company. It doesn't care about how much we've spent, how much we've lowered our CAC. You have to pivot based off of what's happening in the market and what's happening. Like, it's ruthless. So for example, there's a brand that we're working with that is getting hammered right now because everyone is selling the exact same product. Everyone is affiliates are selling the same product. Temu is selling the same product. They're getting hammered and their CAC is double what it was. And that's an example where, can you optimize your way to fix that? In that situation, probably not. But that's where you kind of have to, that's why you need to talk to other people that have seen more things, have different perspective. Because again, like the world is ruthless. And sometimes lowering your, I'm not trying to be contradictory, but lowering your threshold to acquire more new customers isn't going to be enough. But there's times where it is. So you have to kind of typically take, like what you said, perspective. And how do you get perspective is by talking to more people that have perspective. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
sure. Man, but it sounds, but it's interesting to hear you talk through the thinking pattern, right? To go, well, how do I know? It's almost like that thing. It's like asking the question, like, how will I know when I'm lost?
Yeah.
It's like, well,
when you have to ride where you want to be.
Right, exactly. and if you can't tell up from, I mean, that's a pretty good clue. If you can't tell what street you're on and what street's over and how to get to where you need to get to, that's a good sign that you're lost. Point being, if someone doesn't have the ability to tell whether they're about to plateau,
yes,
or tell whether the threshold that they're setting for their paid, the targets that they're setting for their paid acquisition is the thing. If they can't tell, it feels like it's everything.
Yes.
Right. Or it feels like it must be this one thing. Exactly to your point. The market is moving like this. If you are just staring at your ad account or staring at your paid acquisition only and trying your darnest to optimize there, you're ignoring the realities of this other stuff that's happening here, or unaware even that it's happening there. I mean, look at what happened to BlackBerry. Bow, bow.
Yeah,
Look what happened to Blockbuster. Bow, bow. The CMO of BlackBerry or Blockbuster, I'm pretty sure would be like, we need to advertise more. We need to start like, reaching more new people.
Yeah.
Or not.
Yeah. I think that I really do feel for founders. I mean, gosh, we're a founder. Like, we're not impervious to this stuff either. But I really do feel for them because you have to make that decision. Is this a market shift in my product, shift in my product in the market, the perception of their needs and wants for the product? Or is it a more competition is being bred into the marketplace? So I think typically what I advise brands is if you're hitting your targets that you originally set and you are making that profit target, that is a good indication. Be more aggressive because it's way easier to pull back from your aggression and spending than it is to try to catch up and ramp up to someone that blew past you. And so typically,
right.
if you're already hitting your targets, be as aggressive as you can because frankly, like your safety net is your customer base. So the bigger that safety net is, the more safety you actually have. The smaller it is, the less
buffer.
Yeah. So I think it was. So I was listening to the All In podcast, one of my favorite podcasts, and Sachs on the recent episode was talking about that. He notices that with these big blue chip companies, the bigger you are, the more mistakes you're allowed to make and still be okay. Kind of the same thing. The bigger your customer list is, the more mistakes you can make and be okay. So the smaller your list, one mistake might put you out. So that kind of, you have to keep that perspective too, is if I want a bigger safety net, I need to have a bigger list.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So that's helpful to know about risk tolerance, level of aggression. It's helpful to know about how to, in some way, I mean, this isn't a full workshop, but how to think through a P&L in relation to media allocation, right? In relation to thresholds and targets for like the required return for the allocation too. You brought up the other thing, which is like the number of creatives, the ability to produce enough for the efforts.
Yes.
That the marketing is trying to do. Like, can you talk through that part?
Yeah. So like with most things, it really depends. And this is not a rule. This is I know. It's like, oh, dang it. It's a directional benchmark. So for example, let's say you're spending $50,000 a month. Okay. And let's say of that 50,000, 15K of that is in testing, meaning I'm trying to test new concepts. Okay. So if that's the case, then typically what that means is I need to, of that 15K, how much does that spend per day? Most brands only have a 10% win rate on new ads they make, meaning 10% of the creatives that they make is going to go on to hit targets. Okay. So what that means is 90% fail. And our methodology is you always want to have new ads ready to go when those 90% fail. So what that means is if you're trying to always have the next thing ready just in time when you need that next creative, that means a lot of brands need a lot more creative testing than they realize. What happens is, in the case with this brand, they make some creatives each month, but they just let them run, meaning they don't have that perpetual cycle of testing. So for example, I think I showed them with how much they were spending, they need to be making 20 to 30 ads a week just for testing, because that's only, if you're lucky, only 10% are going to go on to hit a target, which means 90% fail, which is why this game is so hard, because you're literally losing more than you're winning, but you're just riding the winners longer.
Yeah, for sure. And you're not your team, the brand itself and the paid efforts are not putting their best foot forward to try to topple that winner every week or at a regular cycle.
Like, how can I go to battle again every week to try to beat that winner? Like, that's a good methodology, frankly, D.
Right. Essentially, how do I lift heavier than last week?
Yeah.
Right. Because if I'm lifting the same weights for like a year, 2 years, nothing's happening really. Like the name of the game is, what can I do to be bigger, faster, stronger than last week? Jump higher, all that stuff. Much in the same way, our creative sprints are essentially that, right? It's to go, all right, what's the plan, guys? We're about to go in for 2 weeks worth of creating stuff and testing things and coming up with concepts and producing creatives and variations and iterations and all that. And then at the end of the whole thing, spit it out, demo it for the brand as well as the team, show and tell for one another. And then what do we learn from that? And then go again. And how do we beat the one that's like, how do we beat our previous record? Because then you can kind of go up and up and up and up and up rather than kind of go, how do we maintain the same, especially if the business objective is growth, not maintenance? Because we have some, we've talked to, help coach or consult certain friends or peers that are just like, I just want to start a little drop ship D2C store. I'm like a programmer or whatever. I just want to maintain this. If it brings in this income, I want it to be low headache. Like that, fine. Right. Sure. But if you're 80 mil trying to get to 200 mil, you really need to have that installed into the software, like the base operating system of the culture of who, like customer acquisition, to go constantly. How do we beat the previous one? How do we?
Yeah, and they had 2 marketing people. It's just, I mean, we have 15 pods and run sprints every 2 weeks. It's just you don't have the resources to do that unless you hire someone outside of it. Yeah, I think I actually thought about lean a lot, D, during that conversation, because when you think about manufacturing with Toyota, if they don't have the next set of parts ready to build the next automobile, the moment that last automobile they made is done, like they're gonna go out of business. It's gonna cause all these problems down the line. And so that's literally the same idea with creative. Is if I don't have creative ready to go, the moment I finish that testing that one creative, whether it's a win or a lose or whatever, then what's going to happen is it will create issues for me down the line, which is why I just have to be in this perpetual machine of always having something ready to go when I need it.
Yeah, totally. We do this and it's funny because I speak to so many marketers, and I just can't help talking about like lean problem solving or these types of concepts. It's so funny how when the concept of just in time shows up, they understand it in regular life. They show up at work and it's almost like they can't translate the fact that they're great at it in other ways. What do I mean? I need to make dinner for the family on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. How about I buy the ingredients? How about I come up with the ingredient list on Saturday? I buy all the ingredients that don't need to be absolutely fresh on Sunday. And then now when I need them on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I've got them there, as opposed to I'm going to figure out what I'm going to have on the family's going to have on Monday morning. I'm going to the grocery store Monday afternoon, and then I'm going to make that dish Monday evening, and then I'm going to do the same again. It's like, and then they go, but I'm time poor. It's like, wait, what?
Yes.
Of course you're time poor. You can just have one day of thinking about what do we feel like eating next week, guys? Let's have a talk about this over dinner. Okay, let me write this thing down. All right, tomorrow that's going to be my grocery list. Should I drive there or should I just pay like an extra few bucks and they can drive to me? Okay, and then now let's have it there, as opposed to so many teams, so many marketers when it comes to they somehow don't take that concept to work. So they go, man. Oh, when do you start producing ads? Oh, when I know I need it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, when do you know that you need it? Probably.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry. Exactly. And then that's the follow-up question. Is like, when do you know you need it? When I don't have anything else. It's like, bro.
When performance is going down the hill, and I'm like,
right. In lean, there's this simple concept called the supermarket. It's quite simple. It's just like the supermarket. At supermarkets, they don't replenish the shelves, guys, when it's completely empty. There's no call to replenish the shelves only when it's empty. That's not the trigger for replenishing the shelves. There's a minimum number there to go when there are 4 cans of this thing left. Automatically, someone from the shop floor would go, it's that time again, and then replenish. Right. So there's a certain number. You can set that number too. So it's not some esoteric, like feel it out thing here. It's to go, well, based on our ad spend, based on our number of SKUs, based on the bundles that we have, what do we need to promote and how many creatives do we need to promote that? And what is our cycle for testing? Based off of that, let's set a number and then at least set the number. After a few cycles, it'll really start to either kick your ass or tell you that your number is too high or too low.
And to tag on to that, so I don't know if I said this in the pod before, my dad owned grocery stores and gas stations. That was like the family business.
No, you never said it on the pod.
I literally grew up stocking shelves, going into coolers and restocking stuff. And what's really great about your example, which is so good, I can't believe I ever thought about that, and I did that all as a teenager, and also what you have to understand with more volume, that frequency may have to change as well. Maybe I don't wait till a specific number. So for example, in ad spend, if I now want to increase my business and spend more, I need to know now that the frequency of my ads is also going to increase in line with that of testing. So for example, let's say you have a $100 average order value. And let's say you're willing to spend $100 on every ad to determine if it's a winner, 1 times your average order value. So what that means is if I'm going to increase my daily budget, that means I'll need more ads because my win rate is going to stay the same. My loss rate is going to stay the same, but now I have more budget and more ads that have to be ready to go for when they need it. So that's where you have to, Dee's right. You have to build a system, and then you have to have the know-withal that what inputs do I need in the system to maintain that volume? Which I know it sounds complicated for founders, but like a system, I feel like people get wigged out when you say system. All D is saying is, what is my process of when am I going to review ads that have won and lost? When am I going to come up with fresh ideas? Who's going to make those ideas? Who's going to write the copy? Like our sprints are not revolutionary. We just think about what did we learn from the last 2 weeks? Let's brainstorm. What are the next concepts? Do some research. Prioritize what are those concepts we're going to make. Design them. Launch them, test them. Like that is our process that never ends. So it's not that complicated. You just have to set the time aside and dedicate to it. And you'll find out that you will make that system quite easy to scale up or scale down.
100%. And for any of us that have worked at a McDonald's or a fast food chain or a grocery store or a gas station, you've worked in a system that someone else created. Like, so if you kind of scan your brain back, you'd be like, yeah, when did I receive the little ticket to say, make 4 small fries, 2 burgers, 4 nuggets? Like, when did that happen? And how did it happen? Like, what happened before me? What happened after me? Like, how do we, so, okay. Oh, cool. Okay. All right. Well, I think I know how to kind of put this together now. It's not this big convoluted, like combobulated thing. It's just to set certain numbers, who's doing what by when, and just see whether that number made sense or not, and then kind of go again. And the trick here really is that log of going, we're setting this as the number. The hypothesis is by setting this number, this thing will happen, and then let it happen and come back to that sheet and say, did what actually happen meet this? No. What do we need to tweak? Okay, let's pick that, tweak that. Done. Next one. I feel like that simple.
The biggest struggle a lot of people have when we talk about this is typically stems from just being clear who owns what. Like who's going to own looking at the last week's test? Who's going to own coming up with new concepts? Who's going to own designing it?
And what does owning it mean too?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. What does that mean? Like what's the definition of owning it and output? If you just figure that out, it's literally, that's 90% of the battle right there. And so I feel like that's where a lot of people get stuck, is there's too much ambiguity of like, are you doing the concepts? Is it on my shoulders? So if you clarify that, that's most of the battle right there.
100%. When this might be a good time for me to call out my buddy, Jason. I've known Jason for a long time. I respect him a lot. He tweeted about this a few days ago, and I just couldn't help but jump in here. Anyway, for brand operators hiring agencies, the best takeaway I've had, and he was a very fantastic agency owner and now works for a very large brand in Singapore. D2C brand, by the way, not Unilever or anything, is to own the outcomes in-house. And I was like, wait, what does that actually mean? Like, do you own the capabilities in-house? And what was like, how do you abstract the capability from that outcome? And we had a bit of a conversation here. I love Jason's answer. So essentially, let's say the business outcome, again, the business objective. If the business outcome is increased net new customer growth at break even for a new channel, that's really specific, right? Owning the outcome internally means knowing what it'll take to get to that goal. And maybe it's going to require capabilities A to E. So then the agency might bring A to C to the table, but D and E are essential. That's where what he's saying essentially is the operator manages the agency, but owning the outcome means deploying the resources to have the D and E component in there, not just like throw everything over to the agency, which is something that ironically, it would benefit an agency. It would benefit us greatly if brands were completely reliant on us. Ultimate lock-in.
Totally.
Right? But it was short-term thinking, absolutely. Long-term thinking, though, it makes no sense whatsoever because, again, definition of owning, if the agency owns all of that stuff, number one, it's too much of a single point of vulnerability that it makes us so uncomfortable that we always say to the brands that we work with and partner with, these parts you need to have, like, you need to know how to do in-house. You need to be able to translate. You need to be able to do that. We can then bring in our thing. Like, we understand that you respect us enough to give us this stuff, but please don't. Like, at the end of the day, we're the nanny. It's still your baby. If you make us raise your baby, teach it language, show it family values and all that, I happen to be brown and you happen to be Caucasian, you're going to have a funky ass baby that really should have Western, like your family's values. Yes. From your, like, from your family roots and all that type of stuff. Like, they really shouldn't be coming with me back to my grandparents' hometown. Yeah,
dude, it's funny you say that, man. Like, the best brands, I'd say that is the best relationship that we work with in terms of performance, getting the most out of both ways of the relationship, as well as just the most enjoyable experience, are the ones where that's exactly it. They come to us and they say, well, oftentimes in collaboration, okay, here is the target. Here is the revenue amount we're trying to hit, number of new customers we're trying to acquire. Here's what we're bringing to the table. Here's creative assets, but I need you guys to make this many creative assets as well. When you do that, it makes it very clear because they're owning the outcome. I know what I want, and I need your guys' help to help me execute that. Or I don't know what I want, help me come up with it. That's okay too. Yes. But that is how you're going to get the most out of whoever you work with, is you have to own that outcome. And first of all, you have to know what outcome you want, to be honest with you. Because just saying growth is not a good outcome. That could be anything.
Yeah, totally. It's like people that show up at the gym and ask me for like help. And I'm like,
I just want to be big.
You hit it right there.
What does that mean, dude?
You hit it right there. And I'm like, so do you want to be stronger or do you want hypertrophy?
Yeah.
Right? Because you train differently that way. Or do you want to be faster? And they go,
you want to be fat and big?
I just want to get bigger, bro. I'm like, and I'll point to some dude, on the treadmill, just like heaving away while he's on a stroll. And I'm like, that kind of big? That's easy. McDonald's is right there. Yeah. Like, if you can't be specific about the kind of help that you need, or even worse, you haven't actually spent the time to respect, like your needs, to be able to articulate them specifically, it becomes very difficult for anyone to be able to help you. Just much in the same way, if you go to a doctor and you go, doctor, I'm not feeling well. Oh, well, what kind of symptoms do you have? I don't know. I'm just not well. It's like, well, does something hurt? Did you break something? Do you have a fever, a sore throat? You're a doctor. You're supposed to know this stuff. I'm just not well. It's like, what is going on right now? It does not help the relationship, as opposed to two parties clicking in and the original party understanding that it is their body, their health, their outcome. The doctor has a very specific skill set. I feel like I'm talking to Liam Neeson right now, but a specific skill set, and he's able to, or he or she are able to deploy that skill set to fit into like hitting that outcome. That's super fascinating. So where is this, like, what next for this brand? Like where were the opportunities uncovered? What's happening next, and what's the exciting stuff that's around the corner?
So for that brand, I gave them some of our templates, how they can more closely link marketing outcomes and targets to financial objectives. They're going to model out how close can they fly to the sun and still be okay, because there's different levels of volume that you can do that, right? So they have to know that themselves. The other thing as well is I helped clarify with them how many creatives they should be making. So it's like a directional target. It's not black or white, but directionally, this is something to shoot for. Mm-hmm. But then ultimately, we made it very clear that, guys, if you want to get the most out of this season, you guys have to pull in the resources for your current marketing team to be able to execute at this level. Otherwise, you're not going to grow this year. But the longest solution is they need to hire a director of growth for their company, because they need someone who can think like that can forecast, understand, here's the new customers we have to acquire at this average order value to hit our targets at this rate. And that's what they really need. And so because no one was giving their marketing person that, they're literally just looking at ROAS. I spent $100. I made $200. Cool.
Yeah, you optimize towards the job that you're told to do.
Yeah, but then that could be returning customers. Is it net new customers? And so that's what the problem was.
Yeah, but how delightful though. Like, I mean, to speak to, and I love that so much about D2C Twitter and the community that we're in, to be able to speak to a very established brand and a founder who has a very established personal brand and reputation, and to still meet someone who's in complete sponge mode. And
I think that's the coolest thing is like, they're okay to come on a call saying, I don't know what I don't know.
My favorite, the best. I mean, like, you know, we try to operate like that all the time. No ego, like just go in full sponge mode, soak it all in, try things out, talk to other people, watch, rinse, repeat. That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's land the plane here. If we can translate the lessons that we talked about for a brand that's about to hit their first million or about to hit their first 5, right? What are some of these cautionary tales to avoid or start preparing for?
I mean, if you're going to hit your first million and you're making profit right now, ask yourself, how big do I want to be? Are you okay to make the same profit number at a less margin, but more volume, and take market share, but have a bigger safety net of new customers? Is that a game you're wanting to play? Are you willing to take on that risk, right? The second thing is just understand, if you are not willing, 100% chance someone else is willing, and they're going to be the next 8-figure brand. It's okay if you don't want to be 8 figures. It really is okay. Whatever you want from your business, but someone else will, and that they are doing it right now. But then also understand that with more cash flow and more volume comes a lot of opportunities, a lot of headaches too, because now your inventory buying gets stressed, your manufacturing maybe gets stressed, your logistics. So more money, more problems in some ways. But I would say just be very clear, what do you want? That's probably the biggest thing right there, is like, be very clear what you want, because if you want to hit that next revenue amount, you have to change how you act. Dee talks about this all the time with our team. You have to change how you think. And what got you here is not going to get you there. That's the biggest part.
Absolutely. We've covered a lot of stuff here, guys. If you do have any questions and want to dig into a deeper area, do us a favor, let us know in the comments, because your comment might just prompt the next podcast episode or discussion point, or maybe a key talking point in there. And we'll also aim to reply to every single comment as possible. Of course, if you're commenting a year later, fat chance, because we're not sitting there on YouTube doing that. And also, if you want tips like these directly into your inbox, don't forget that we do have a newsletter as well. I'm going to put a link into the show notes for that newsletter. so that it's directly in your inbox every single time. We get a lot more tactical in that space. This really is a great place for just Ray and I to talk, and then you guys get some value. But in that newsletter, it's all about you. We shoot it through, and it's highly tactical, and it's also very in the now. What's working right now? What's not working right now? And what we're experimenting on. So I'm going to put that into the show notes. Highly encourage you guys to join our newsletter. Sweet, Ray. Let's call it a day here. Thank you so much for taking us through that. Yeah, good talk for sure. And for you guys, we'll see you the next time. Adios, everybody.